So to continue off what I was talking about here, here's the thing. The establishment for decades, the Democratic and Republican establishment both, have propped up terrible candidates for decades. Okay? And sometimes don't even vet the people themselves. And I want to remind you, people that are part of the elite club, they cover for those people. FYI. So this overhyped nonsense they're going on and on about Graham Plattner, it's ridiculous. That's all I'm going to say here, because they propped up so many flawed people for decades. They covered for these elite corrupt politicians. And again, they had somebody who was in their club who had 5, 6, 7 assault allegations, and they knew about it for years and covered until the guy ran for higher office. Governor, was it Swalwell for California? So now they're sitting here screaming about a small wing of grassroots who backed a candidate they didn't like from Maine because he had one or two things come out about him, and he's flawed. He doesn't represent the blah 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 blah. What was Eric Swalwell? And again, I already know you're going to think, what about Donald Trump? Well, we know that. That's quite apparent. The Republican Party don't care about moral clarity at all. Okay, we already know this about the Republicans. We know this already. They don't care. And by the way, the noise from the Republicans about Graham Plattner, save it. Okay, we're not buying the BS. You just want to shame people for supporting a guy who's speaking out against the corrupt oligarch, and you're using a couple of his flawed characteristics to shame liberals or progressives for voting for Graham Plattner. And now that he dropped out in being tarnished with scandal, okay, that you want to further push that shame because you think that's going to help your girl Susan Collins get reelected in Maine. I got news for you. It's not going to change a thing. Unless the Democratic Party from the establishment from Washington, D.C. decides to come in and appoint a AIPAC corporate Democrat. Okay. Then your Susan Collins might survive re-election. But I want to remind people, this stuff with the Republicans, ignore that noise. Look at who they supported for president. I'm so overhearing about the Graham Plattner stuff. I'm done. I don't care. You know what? Honest to God, I know people are going to be mad at me for saying this, but if I was in that situation in Maine, again, I believe in moral clarity. Absolutely. Okay. And I believe in accountability. And I think it was right for him to drop out, considering all the stuff that was stacking up against him. He had too much baggage. It's just reality. And he obviously has a checkered history of women. We know this. It's problematic. Now, I don't know the full extent of the story that went down with this last woman, but it seems like it's a pattern because all these women came out and said very similar things about him. Okay. There's nothing else to say to that. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I'll be honest. Considering what the Republican Party represents and considering what Susan Collins has voted for throughout her career and what she represents as an establishment crook, I still would have supported Graham Plattner. And you guys come out and shame us left people all you want. I don't care. Because at the end of the day, he would have supported the things that we care about. Do I think he had character issues? Absolutely. But so does Donald Trump. So does everybody in Congress right now. So, again, I don't excuse it. I think the Democrats should vet better candidates. I think the left should have done a better job vetting their candidates. I don't disagree with that. But, that's why this stuff should come out early. And that's why you got to vet people ahead of time, because that way we avoid this nonsense. But I want to remind people, Boehners voted for what they thought was a real human being. Voters are not voting for a clone in a lab. They're voting for someone who's willing to fight for their everyday needs and speak to their issues. That's just reality. Okay? Now, it's fair to want to fight for moral clarity, and it's fair to want to hold elected officials accountable or candidates for office, you know. And yes, the record matters. And sometimes their personal life has effect on the reflection of their character. It's fair. It's fair to criticize those things. I'm not against them. I was not against people being critical of Blattner. I'm totally okay with it. You know, I just think the way it's been heightened for the last several days is a little ridiculous, considering the fact he's no longer running. He's dropped out. It's over. He's not going to run for another office. We know that now. And by the way, he was not some random dude. It turns out he was well connected with money. His family had money. He come from a family with money, so he had influence in Maine. So that's another thing. He wasn't just some random outsider. So he had connections to get where he got to run for that higher office. I just remind people of that. But you know, a new person will step up. And I just hope the process for the Maine Democratic Party is fair. And my advice to them is tell the DSCC to stay out of it. Washington does not need to get involved in Maine politics or any state politics. Washington needs to keep their butt out of it, because Washington has a way of messing things up. Because Washington wants to keep the elite in power and in charge. So if they have their hand in picking a candidate for any state, yet alone Maine, they're going to pick a candidate that's not the people's choice, because they want to protect their corporate power. That's bottom line. And that's all I want to say in this video. And I'm going to close the chapter with this whole Graham Plattner nonsense and Maine Senate race and all that, because it really has nothing to do with me anyway. I live across the country. But I've been wrong about things. I've been right about things. But I'm willing to own up to when I'm wrong. Okay? And it was too much of a hill to climb with this guy. And it would have been questionable whether he actually would have won against Susan Collins, because of all the baggage coming out against him. It was too much. They had too much oppo on this guy. So it only made sense to pressure him to drop out. And I know it's going to make some people mad. I don't disagree with them pushing him to drop out because of the amount of stuff that was going to be being used against him. But the Democratic Party needs to learn from that, in the sense that they still got to listen to the will of the people. And that means they have to respect the wishes of Mainers and allow them to participate in a form of democracy, or even the delegates, the 500-600 delegates who are going to vote on a candidate. They need to keep in mind their own constituents and understand what Maine voters picked, and they need to respect the wishes of those votes. So if it's not going to be Graham Plattner who had the ticket, it has to be somebody that's willing to replicate his platform, because that's what your voters in Maine want. And that's bottom line. So I'm going to close my chapter on this scandal and nonsense and all this stuff. But I want to let you know, don't let these people into shaming you. They had terrible judges of character in the past. These people in the media, the people in the political elite of both parties. And don't get me started about the Republican Party. So, yeah. That's all I'm going to say here. But anyways, y'all, have a great night. Love y'all. Goodbye. Good night.